Today's story is going to be about Benoit Mandelbrot and his fractals. Once upon a time, there was a mathematician named Benoit Mandelbrot. Mandelbrot loved geometry. He loved shapes and the mathematical equations that described those shapes. He found he could look at equations and formulas and see in his mind their shapes. He noticed that the shapes in the geometry he studied were all smooth. When he looked out at nature and the world, he noticed that those shapes were not smooth. They were very rough and complicated. Mountains were not smooth like triangles. Clouds were not smooth like spheres. Lightning was never in a straight line. There were other mathematicians that said shapes in nature were too complicated to be described by mathematical equations. But Mandelbrot didn't believe that. He studied the shapes he saw in nature, and he wondered about them. He noticed that in nature there were lots of shapes that looked complicated, but also seemed simple. When he studied them, he found that they were made up of smaller shapes that looked like the bigger shapes. They were self-similar. He thought, maybe we don't need to create a really complex equation to describe these natural shapes, but instead we need to think about what process created the complexity. We don't need to worry about what it is, but how it got there. Maybe it's something simple, done over and over again. Mandelbrot came up with a simple equation that had two very special qualities. One, it was recursive. What that means is that each new calculation was plugged back into the equation to generate the next new number. There was another thing that was special, and that was that his equation included a complex number. And complex numbers are numbers that of a special type that include a real part and an imaginary part. Well, he took his equation and he plugged it into a computer and he ran those calculations millions and millions of times, and he plotted them out with the help of the computer. And guess what? What do you think the shapes and patterns that were generated looked like? Do you think they looked like things in nature? They did. The patterns reminded him of things we see in nature. And what we learned is sometimes very complicated things are just simple things done over and over.